quite young. How did you get involved?
Well, it's a family thing, to be fair. Right from very young, my family have been involved. So yeah, I've been involved since I was a schoolboy and progressed through to being a licensed trainer.
Dumb question, but why do you guys get up so early in the morning?
It's a dumb question. There's a dumb answer. I don't know. Look, I think in a lot of places, not so much Christchurch, but sort of more Australia, they like to get the horses work before the heat comes. That's probably more the theory, but yeah, there's no method to our madness.
I guess there are a lot of people who do this before they go to their regular job.
Yeah, that's correct. You're dead right. So mine, it's a full-time job for me, this, so it doesn't sort of matter whether I get up early, but I do. But yeah, I don't know why people do it.
Now, apprentices, part of your role as a trainer is to literally bring through apprentices.
Yeah, that's right. We have young people come through the ranks, like as I say, come from where I started from schoolboy material. So it's good to, we have to bring them along and teach them their craft. And lucky enough, I've had a couple through in my first season, and I'm happy with how they go.
What's involved with training a jockey?
Yeah, it's quite hard to tell, to be honest. Look, they've got to learn to ride. Of course, it's probably the first and foremost. And a lot of got natural ability, and a lot of them you've got to sort of teach. Obviously, start them on the very quiet horses and progress from there.
So, as a trainer, where do you find the horses to train and the different owners?
Yeah, very difficult. I was lucky enough to sort of get a stable full of horses from a trainer that elected to pull out of her South Island branch. So yeah, it was a good start. I had another couple of owners as well, but yeah, you've got to get out and do a bit of networking, and I also feel that success is what brings a lot of new people to the game.
Long hours, I guess. It's 7 days a week.
Yeah, it is at the moment for me, but hey, look, I'm young and new and having a go. Yeah, but it is 7 days, and it's long days. Sometimes you get owners ringing at 8 o'clock at night, so it can be long days, 24/7.
It must be pretty heartbreaking to have a horse that you've brought up and peaking, and then something niggly happens and you have to scratch it.
Without a doubt, it's nothing worse, and it's happened to me regularly, as it happens to everyone. It's they're athletes and fine-tuned, and things do go wrong, and unfortunately, you've just got to cop it.
But you're sending one of your horses over to Australia to take them on.
That's right. Yeah. The owners decided to have a go at Australia and send this 3-year-old filly over there, and her name's Don't Poke the Tiger, and she's done very well in New Zealand here.
Very pretty horse.
She is, and she knows it too. Like at times, she gets up on her toes at times, and yeah, she's a runner, and she's done very well for us. Yeah.
So, what special training do you do to get them over to totally different conditions?
To be fair, no different to what we're doing here, really, in a way. I've never taken a horse over to Australia before, so it's going to be an eye-opener for myself and the horse.
But we do go over there with horses and beat them.
That's correct, yeah. You've got to have the right sort of horse to do it. We're going to find out whether she's good enough. She's definitely good enough in New Zealand. She's 6 times black print placed. Hasn't quite got there as a win yet, but she's won 2 races other than that.
What age group is she?
She's a 3-year-old. So she's going over there for the Guineas on July the 1st.
How do you get them over there? Obviously by aeroplane.
That's right, yeah. We're flying out of Christchurch on the 9th of June, and I think we're targeting a lead-up race at Ipswich, and then into July the 1st is the Guineas at Caloundra. And so I'm a little bit sort of not 100% clear on the owner sort of has mapped it out, and I'm going for a ride.
She's getting a look in before she goes though.
Yes, she runs here on the 7th because she had a bit of a spell, and so on the 7th, fresh up at Riccarton here, just down the chute. We're using it as a trial, and then 2 days later we fly out. And
she's taking her best friend as the groom.
Yeah, Alexis is going with it, my partner, and she'll go with the horse and look after it. That's the plan.
So really, it's just continuation of taking these jolly Aussies on, isn't it? Well,
it's trying to get a bit of black print for the horse. In New Zealand, all the 3-year-old Guineas are finished, and so we thought they go a bit longer in Australia, and so we're aiming to try and get that win as a black print for her.
And then she'll come back again.
I definitely. Craig Dawson, the owner, he's a breeder, and so he's had a very good offer for the horse up till now, and he's turned it down, and no, he's got it for a broodmare.
Do you reckon she's another Winx?
Oh, I don't think so. It's not that good. There's not many winks about. We all like to dream about it.
So you must be really rapt though as a trainer to have a horse that's going international.
Oh, definitely, and I'll say I'm privileged to have this horse. It's not very often you get a good horse like this one is, my best in the stable, and you've got to look after them.
Bowen therapy. Now, Claire, the first thing I want to know is what is Bowen therapy?
Bowen therapy is basically a fairly gentle form of body work, and we're working mainly with superficial fascia. So
Which means?
That's connective tissue that runs throughout your whole body. Excuse me. It's around everything. So if you took the rest of everything else away in your body and just left the fascia, you'd still be able to recognise who you are. So the fact that it's like that means that we basically can communicate with the whole body by doing little moves on the body surface.
So Claire, what are you actually looking for?
Structural alignment and any muscles which appear to be more tense on one side than the other. The body doesn't function very well when it's not correctly structurally aligned, and this form of therapy is very good at helping the body to correct that alignment.
So to me already I'm thinking this is a cross between massage and chiropractic.
Yeah, it's funny because people always want to compare it with other modalities, but really it's a unique modality. I mean, it's the same in that we're trying to correct the body's dysfunction, but you can't say, is it like massage? Not really, because massage goes with the muscle fibres. We go across them in a single moves rather than repetitive type of moves that you have with massage. And chiropractors are basically working on the spine itself and trying to correct the dysfunction by realigning the joints, whereas we release the tissues and then the muscles will realign themselves. So, the joints will realign themselves.
What's this particular person's problem with their left leg?
There's nothing wrong with her leg, but we treat the whole body. Her problem was initially upper back and neck discomfort, pain, but basically that's a result of the rest of the body not being structurally correct. So often you have we talk about victims and criminals. So the victim is usually the bit that we feel is sore, and the criminal is the silent bit that you don't know is causing that problem. And this is why this therapy is so good, because we're treating the whole body. We pick up things that might be causing the problem, which could be long way from where you've actually got the pain.
So back into the lower back area.
Yep.
That's amazing, because you're right, there's no massage and there's no sort of bone cracking.
It's very gentle. We're just releasing all these, the tissues, or we're giving the brain signals to come along and initiate its own release, basically.
A lot of people suffer from tight backs, tight necks, leg problems, of pain shooting down because of stress.
That's very real.
And this is actually able to, and I'm using layman's terms, but it's going to unknot all that stress and tension.
Definitely. It almost seems like it's too good to be true, and it is. It's an amazing form of bodywork.
So how long would an establishment like this, how long are you actually on the bed for?
Around about an hour. It's very specific to what that person needs on that day. So I don't charge per hour, it's per treatment. And it could be anything from half an hour through to an hour and a quarter, depending on what your body needs on that day. So.
Do you find that blokes are prepared to come and stretch out on your bench?
Oh, definitely. If they can realise they're going to not have pain, they'll be here too. I also use this Bioptron light, which I'm just going to bring in as part of my treatment. It's a second modality, but it combines really well with the Bowen therapy. Basically, this is working on just visible light, with different filters, and each filter has a different wavelength and therefore a different vibration, and it's the vibration that we're using as a therapeutic.
So this is not like the old heat ray lamps that we used to use a million years ago?
No, the heat it just runs at body temperature. So it's not heat, it's the vibration that is therapeutic. And what I'm going to do is start with stimulating the whole spinal column. So we do some light at the top of her base of the neck and then down the sacral area, and that will stimulate the whole spinal column.
That's not heat?
No, it does feel, some people say it feels warm. Depends on what your body's interpretation of that colour is. Sometimes it can feel warm, sometimes it can feel cold, sometimes people feel nothing. So it's just what an individual feels from it. But it actually does run at 37 degrees, so it's around about body temperature.
And you're fixing people?
I'm enabling people's bodies to fix themselves, basically.
Carl, we are what we eat?
Very true. We see that every day in our modern day life, that we're eating these processed carbohydrates, highly processed foods that are having a major effect on us. They make us obese, have heart disease rates going through the roof, and many other things going on with us. And we really need to stick to the natural foods that are just the way they are in nature.
Most people would say we do eat natural food, though.
Well, they like to use a bit of a slang term for it. It's natural if it's a food product that's been processed for 100 times for changed into something that's not even anything that we naturally know what it is. A piece of bread doesn't look like that when it's growing. There's no bread tree. There's no pasta tree. They come from this thing that we wouldn't typically eat, this grain that we wouldn't grab off and eat as is. It tastes pretty bad when we do that. And we process it down into this white little powder that we then put into a formula with eggs and milk and all this other stuff. And we make it grow into this loaf of bread that we then can actually stomach to eat. And this is the type of food that we're eating a majority of, instead of having that be a tiny portion of what we eat. We should be eating more vegetables, more fruits, more of the natural meats, nuts, seeds, those things that occur in nature, the form that we find them, without having to process them and grind them up and do all this other stuff to them.
The lead versus steel. There's a lot of people walked away when we had to use steel.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends. I mean, of course, when a lot of people don't like change, but nowadays steel is there's a lot of options out there which you can definitely still shoot and kill birds effectively with steel. It's finding the right combination between brand, ammunition, what your gun is, what your choke should be. It's definitely still effective. Obviously, lead is going to be more effective. It's heavier, it's more malleable. You will have more killing power, but you can find equivalent, if not so much equivalent, but a very good second best in steel.
So perhaps somebody should come in here with their shotgun and talk to the gunsmith.
Yes, definitely. Or one of the salesmen here. We can definitely help you out with what choke you should use, what ammunition we recommend in steel. There's many different brands and many different velocities, and we'll find a right combination for you.
Because that's one of the things that I found was I thought, what choke do I use? And I didn't want it to go boomf and not work or whatever.
Well, there's so many different aspects of duck shooting and what what ammo, what choke. There's 5 different chokes. There's 6 different sizes of duck ammunition. It can be quite confusing.
As far as the guns, have they changed very much? You're obviously a Beretta fan, but
yes, Beretta, Benelli. I mean, I think what we find is that the same brands are kind of sprucing up their models. So the models over the last 20 years have been much the same. Now the Beretta A400 with the recoil reducing stock, that's come out in probably the last 5 years. It's a really, really great gun. Your Benelli's, they've had a very, very similar gun over the last 20 years. So the guns are still the same. We're dealing with 2 different types of operation, gas and inertia. And so we've got many different brands that fit within that.
And tell me a bit more about these camouflage things. You turn up with those on the morning, or do you set them up beforehand?
Well, it depends. A lot of guys will build a standalone mai. You know, they've spent the last month preparing with camo nets and everything. But we do have the blinds, which are so easy. You just set them up like a tent. They unfold instantly, and that's really handy if you've got quite a few people shooting in the same place. And you want to spread out, or because they're mobile, obviously you can change your position during the day if you're finding where you are isn't working. So it's really handy, and especially for those people that don't have time to build their mai. You've got single chair and double chair, and you've got quad blinds, so it's amazing, the camo blinds that we have as well.
And of course those decoys that I'm still chuckling about.
Yes, the motion decoys, honestly, it's really worth it. I think once you give it a go and you see how well they work in the environment, you're blown away. You wouldn't shoot without one once you've used one.
And the circling ducks?
Yes, the circling ducks, they're my favourite. One year we set them out at the back of the mai because we didn't have room in the front of the mai. We were wondering why all the ducks were wanting to land at the back of the mai. They attract the ducks so well. They are so attracted to movement. So it's really well worth having a movement decoy.
And one last shot for we who enjoy duck shooting, it's not actually murder, it's actually culling.
It is. I think it's really amazing if you get into the conservation of duck shooting. You know, the ducks, they can destroy the waterways, they can eat a lot of the feed that the farmers want to conserve. There's a whole lot of things that are benefits of duck shooting for our environment. And we have an outrageous amount of numbers of ducks, and we need to cull them. We're helping the environment.
In the season, it looks as though those spuds are coming out of the ground all right.
Yes, they are now. We've been very patiently waiting for the rain to stop and then the ground to dry out enough to get digging. So it's all guns blazing now.
Your parish covers a fair bit of dirt. I mean, you're in Hororata now, but you've got other areas. Has it been wet right over?
Yes, it's been wet everywhere, from Amberley, Southbridge, up here where we're trying to dig at the moment. So yeah, we're wanting to work on all fronts at once at the moment.
But they are coming out in good order?
Yes, coming out in good order. We've had rain, but not too much. There's nothing drowned or anything ghastly like that. So, I think the rain's come gently, so the ground hasn't gone all hard or anything silly like that. So once it's drying out now, they're coming out very good.
And the other thing is, obviously, you've sprayed them off or whatever, so they're not still growing.
Oh, exactly, yes. And likes of this paddock here, it had a wee roundup over it about 4 weeks ago. There's just a little bit of grass struck in there, and normally we'd have them dug, and it wouldn't be a problem, but I could just see if the wet weather lingered on, it was a good move to get that cleaned out.
You're starting to turn to religion a wee bit.
Yes, yes.
Tell me about the machine, because obviously the stones around this area, and none of the stones go into the packet.
Yes, well, just as well too. They'd be a bit crunchy, wouldn't they? So we go through the ground at planting time and separate out the stones and the worst of the clods, and get them out of the area that we're going to grow into. And then when the harvester comes through, it's reasonably stone and clod free. But in this paddock here, there's actually some shingle patches, and we've probably been a bit greedy as far as some of the areas we've gone into with the planter. And going through the harvester, we're just dealing with a bit of small stone in place there, but the machine's making a pretty good job now. It's dried out of separating that out, and have a couple of people up there to get the last few bits out.
I was just going to say, hence your staff that are sitting up on the top there.
Yes, I mean, half the time they're up there with hands in their pocket, but when you hit a wee shingle patch, there's just a bit there to get out, and rather than slow down too much, you want to keep the speed up, so you have the extra ones up there just for that short time.
Looking back over the season, been disease free?
Yeah, it's been all over the place, like particularly this paddock here. They were setting up to be yet another very good yielding crop, and we had a nice gentle spring. Everything was looking good, but be fair to say they probably got a bit too soft in the tops, and then with all that strong nor'west we had through January, there was probably one wind too much for this crop here, and it blew quite a bit of the tops around too much, and the yield's down because of it, probably down 15% at least from what we'd be looking to get.
So next year, where do you have to shift to stop getting those horrible little scabby things on your spuds?
Well, we don't really get any of those horrible little scabby things.
I know
on
you
our
don't, that's why I'm
potatoes,
asking you how you avoid them.
Yeah, so no, it's just about having good crop rotations and getting into ground that hasn't had potatoes for as long as possible. Never's usually the best, but that's sometimes asking a bit much. You do have to come back to paddocks again, but we've already been looking further out on this property as to which paddocks will be lining up for next year that have had quite a good interval since potatoes, if they've had potatoes in at all.
Because that's how you do avoid it, isn't it?
Yes, especially for washing quality potatoes. We're after that really good skin finish, and often the best way to achieve that is fresh, clean ground, and also a little bit of notice of what's been in the rotation leading up to it.
Other crops you're looking at?
Yeah, well, pumpkins at the moment, we're full noise into the pumpkin harvest. It's been held up a bit with the wet weather like everything else, so daylight today with a southerly wind, it's very good for that, because we don't like to pick the pumpkins up until they're actually dry, because they get all smudgy and get the dirt all around them, and it does seem to have an effect on the keeping quality. So daylight today, perfect for that. So I think we've got about another 5 maybe days to go to get that wrapped up, which will be good.
And then you've got your broccoli as well.
Yes, so we've been reasonably successful so far on the planting front at getting the plants in the ground in between the wet intervals. We seem to get a rain once a week, and just before the next one we get out there.
You get them in there.
We sneak them in, and we're planting up at Ambley at the moment, and the ground varies a bit up there, so there's some areas up there that once they get wet they tend to stay wet, and trying to get a fertiliser truck on or trying to work the ground, we're starting to have to work around parts of the paddock, and that just makes things a bit more difficult, but nothing like a good challenge.
You've always had challenges, haven't you?
Yeah, oh, that's growing, isn't it? You know, everything's different every year, and different soil types and areas you're working on, so if it wasn't challenging it'd be boring, and if it'd be boring we wouldn't be doing it, I guess.
Well, you'd probably have less grey hair.
Yeah.
But people are saying that because of the bad weather the price of veggies is going to go up. Yes? No?
Yes, well that's been reflected right now with the price of broccoli. We've been cutting reasonably good volumes all the way through, but the wet weather has impacted some of the growing areas in the North Island. They've had trouble there with head rot and things like that, with just too much wet weather for too long, and it's something that we run the risk of getting down here as well. But so broccoli prices have firmed up as a result of that, but that can change again just as quickly. Potato prices, I'm hearing that the prices should be good and steady this year. I think the processors are after all the potatoes that they can get this year, and that has a big impact on our fresh market, because if there's such a big area and volume grown for that market, that if there's a small surplus there or a small amount that they're struggling to place and they come over into the fresh market, it can have a big impact on that, being the smaller of the two. But pumpkins will probably be more realistically priced this year. I mean that as far as the prices for us should be better. Last year the prices were very low on account of some big yields in the North Island, and I think overall some of the crops, particularly the South Island crops, kept quite well last year because of the warm dry growing season. This year the Nelson crops haven't been so good, and I think they'll be finished up fairly soon, so it's setting up a good stage for hopefully a healthy selling season down here this year. But some of our yields are back a bit on account of the weather, with a slow start in the spring and then a bit of a sticky part at the end, so I'm not sure how well they'll keep this year on account of the conditions they've grown through.
Now you're known for selling those baby ones as well as the bigger ones. The grading is done at the works, at your yard?
Yes, so everything's all taken out of the field in one sample and size-wise, and then it's back to the pack house for washing. A lot of the potatoes we're digging at the moment are going into storage, so we like to get the potatoes out while the conditions are very good for getting them out, so it's more efficient, and it's better for the quality of the potatoes, it's better for the soil and the paddocks, for people returning back to get next crops in there. So yeah, we're digging a lot of what we're doing at the moment is going straight to store, and some of it's going in to feed the pack house.
You've got lowline cattle, and they're known for their nature, and you're bringing in town students.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Well, this is largely stems from the way lowlines are treated in Australia, which is the birthplace, the home of lowlines. And a lot of schools over there actually have their own lowline studs. And that's where I was first introduced to this concept of school children handling cattle, growing up with these cattle, breaking them in, taking them to shows, and going into from that to become cattle judges and handlers and run their own studs. So we approached Rangiora High and were very well received, and so we started off as a trial some years ago now. with just a handful of students who came out here, and it was a learning experience for both of us, because I wasn't too sure how this... My wife said, now, you are really looking for trouble. You're taking somebody else's kids with cattle into a public arena. This is going to be rather like herding cats, isn't it, you know?
Osh springs to mind.
Oh, it does indeed. And it is very much a thing we have to do. We start... Each year we start with them with not a fully new group now, because we've got some that have been there from the third form or whatever it is now, third form, fourth form, fifth form, and they're just passing on. But the group keeps getting refreshed from the bottom. But in the early days, they were all pretty new to it. And as I said to the kids, I always say, now, they may look small, they're only little, but it'll actually weigh more than you, it's faster than you, and it's stronger than you. Never forget it. Unless you've got that animal trusting you, you're always going to have a problem. And this is what we do. We just take the animal into the crush, and they stand there with a kid on each side, talking and patting to them. That's the first day, just that. Then rubbing them down with a brush. Next day we might put a halter on it and tie it in the crush with a halter on, so it gets used to that. And then we'll take it out there, and the kids are standing at the fence with the animal. And then gradually they'll start walking them around in those yards there, and then eventually it's out into a paddock. That's always a big moment for everybody. And eventually they're taking them to shows and handling them. So.
And these are town children?
Most of them are. Some of them are off lifestyles. We had one or two in the first year that were actually genuine country kids. But most of them are town-based. It's surprising how popular it is with the town-based ones. But having said that, two of our girls have gone on to go into studs of their own and are showing on their own account now. Neither of them had any association with cattle. One had ridden ponies before, so wasn't unused to bigger animals, but had no association with cattle till they came here. Now they're running their own studs. The other thing is that they've learnt that there is a future in it, at least in the short term. We've had ones from here have won trips to Sydney Royal Show. Last year there were two of the girls of our team, one who'd won the trip at Canterbury and her sister, both went to Future Beef and Fielding and were leading cattle up there. Another girl has been across to Rockhampton to Beef Week in Rocky in Queensland, which is the second biggest cattle exposition in the world. There's one bigger in the States. And this year another lass is off to Eka, to the Royal Brisbane Show. And it's all just through doing what they do here. They also get the competition in the team handlers at Canterbury. Rangiora last year was first and third in the team's competition for handling. And they rather like doing that, and yeah, it's great to watch them develop. And we've got some who are definite town girls who are just smitten with the idea of breeding cattle. And as long as you get that grounding right, they learn very quickly, and they touch wood. None of them have actually lost respect for the animal. Well, you know, they're always wary.
They'll be spoken to pretty quickly if they do.
Oh, they do. And it is an OSH thing we've got to be aware of all the time. But it's like they've got to bring boots. They're not allowed sand shoes or any light footwear in the yards with the animals, that sort of thing. But they have got to, or have come to, actually respect the animals and get that bond with an animal. And very quickly now they're sort of picking out their own one from the starters, as it were, and they'll take them through. And I mean, the big bull in there is Rising 4, and he's got the same lass who's in this group as right with him, and she actually has had photographs taken of us sitting astride him, riding him. Not over hurdles, I might add, but no, just sitting astride him while he's in the pen.
Gillian, you've been doing this with students now for quite some time.
7 or 8 years at Rangiora High, yes.
It's a pretty new concept, even though it's been going for 8 years.
At the start there were about 3 high schools involved, us and Boys High and Girls High combined, but now there's quite a few coming on. We have about 8 schools competing every year, and it's getting tougher and tougher each year as they get more and more experienced.
It must be really rewarding for you as a teacher to watch them blossom.
Our girls in the rural area, a lot of them just sit back sometimes and let the boys take command, but with this it lets the girls come out and shine because they can actually see they can handle the animals and they're doing a good job at it.
And they thoroughly enjoy it. You can't get enough for them coming out here.
They're out here every week, twice a week, having a great time.
Rewarding for them, obviously.
Yeah, it's very rewarding for them because they get to actually mature with as far as relating with other people go. They get confidence in public speaking and they stand in front of all the adults that are watching the competition on the Friday and judge animals and say why they've rated them how they have.
It's very important for a young student to actually be a show person and actually being able to speak off the cuff in front of a whole lot of people who are strangers.
Yes, and at the very start they find it hard, but they get a lot of training by Phil and Kay, and they come down here every week and they actually show them how to do all that sort of stuff. But on the day, it's still quite daunting for some of them, but they do a great job trying and they do really well.
You're one very proud teacher.
Yes, I've actually watched it grow over the last 7 or 8 years. And at the start we weren't too sure, the kids weren't too sure, but now they're all knocking down the door every year asking when we're starting. So they're keen as mustard.
The cattle all look very well groomed. What's involved? What do you have to do?
It basically starts out with they get a lot of washing done, all nice and clean, and then I go at them with sets of clippers with all different types of length blades on them, just to try and highlight their good points, like the animals that are for sale here today. A lot of the farmers' pride and joy, so they're bringing their best animals out to sell. So it's sort of my job just to make them look as pretty as possible by giving them haircuts and things like that.
Why do you clip them so close to the skin?
With dairy cows compared to beef cows, like dairy cows, they don't put on so much weight or muscle. A lot of their energy goes into making milk, so we clip them nice and short just to show off their bone quality, like the angles that they have with their bone, the levelness they have to their spine. It's just to realistically highlight their dairiness realistically.
And you give them a mohawk right down the centre of the back?
Yeah, we give them a mohawk. In dairy terminology, it's called a top line. So basically the point of that is to level them out so it's nice and straight from a distance. And it just makes them a little more eye-appealing. And I've been lucky, the hair here in New Zealand's been really good to work with and wanted to stand up nice and easy. So.
And you do the tail with the tassel at the bottom?
Yeah, we like to fluff the tail right up. It just sort of adds a little more appeal, makes them look a little more fancy and a little more stylish.
Now these are Holstein Friesians. Is it the same for all?
So when I'm clipping different cows, I pretty much clip them the same. Maybe like these are for sale and it's a little cold here or coming into colder times, so I haven't clipped them as short as I would for a show, but for the sale, like that's sort of the standard length we like to clip them with what's called a 502 blade.
So you're a full-time groomer?
Yeah, full-time groomer. It's called a cattle fitter. I've been lucky enough to come across to New Zealand now. I think this is my 6th time, mostly in the North Island, first time in the South Island, but enjoying it a lot. And I've also been lucky enough to go to North America once or twice, and then going back there again for 2 months this year for a couple of big shows.
So how does a young person get involved with doing what you're doing?
Oh, I guess you just really have to have a love of showing cows, and a few people said it's an art, and I think it is nearly an art to try, and you are creating something. You have like a base product, and you can change them in ways by the way you work with the hair and shaping the hair and stuff like that to make them look the best they can, really. And I guess I was lucky enough to get into it. My family's have been 4th generation dairy farmers in North Queensland near Cairns in Australia. In the past 4 years I've been living in Victoria on a stud farm there, Blue Chip Genetics. We've had some really nice show cows, and it's just a passion realistically to work with them. And I guess it's like anything, you just want to try and better yourself all the time at what you're doing, and I think once you stop trying to better yourself, you probably should stop, because if you're not trying to get better and better all the time, you're probably not enjoying it as much. So I'm lucky enough that I enjoy it and can just try and keep getting better and better.
Are there many people doing it?
Probably as a profession in Australia, there would maybe be a max of 5 people that do it full time throughout the year. But certainly once you get into, say, North America and Canada, like there's certainly a lot more people that do it, just purely because there's a lot more shows and a lot more sales in that area.
Well done. The cattle are looking very impressive.
Thank you very much. Hopefully they all sell very well for their owners today. They've all been tremendous help here at the sale, so thank you very much.
We've got a situation where these new breweries, the boutique breweries, are coming on. What's the difference between a boutique brewery and a Goliath?
Well, I suppose we call ourselves artisan brewers, and the art of brewing has been around for centuries. And I suppose we're going back to formulas, which our particular company has brought from the south of Germany, Bavaria particularly, and we brought those styles of beers back, and that's been part of the blueprint of the company. And it's been a really interesting journey because we have the beautiful opportunity to enhance the great water of the Canterbury Plains from the Southern Alps. We take malts from the Dunsandel region, we take hops from the Motueka Basin and the Walker area of the top of the South Island, and we sort of find ourselves on a bit like bakers, starting early and coming to work and starting with the base ingredients and then going through a day-to-day process of producing batches of beer in a singular sense. And 1,000 litres is our batch size, so that from the original brewing day to the finished product, there's 1,000 litres of beer made per day on a day-to-day basis.
Now you've got a family of beers that you're producing.
That's correct, we do.
How do you work? What's the difference? How do you make one like a Pilsner compared to a light or something?
Okay, like everything else, the base ingredients, obviously, as I said, the greatest ingredient, and 80% of it is water. But then, of course, we start with the malts. So if I've got a selection here of malts of all different, and I'll just sort of spin that around just to sort of give you an idea that, you're starting, particularly if it was a Pilsner, if we were producing a Pilsner malt or a Pilsner beer for the day, the base malt is here. With some of these lighter, we have a little bit of wheat there, which gives us a little bit of head retention, and it gives us a nice white, creamy head upon a Pilsner style beer. Plus we have a little bit of what we call Munich malt, which gives it a bit of maltiness and a bit of background and a bit of body, just to sort of try and capture those lovely hops and give it that really crisp, clean lime citrus character, which is pretty predominant as part of that style of beer. So, that would be it. However, if we found ourselves, producing a dark beer, well, a bit like making a cake, we would then interpret some of these more caramelised, toasted, and of course obviously heavily toasted like a coffee bean type malts, which will then dictate the colour and also the flavours of the beer.
So it's very much the malter as well as everything else?
Yeah, malt is the next outside of the water, malt is the most next integral product, and then of course followed by that is the New Zealand hops.
I'm intrigued, you were telling me about the different tastes, because there are now citrus and there is now chocolate and there is now toffee. How do you do that?
Well, I suppose if you look at the base ingredients, I mean, you're particularly in your coloured malts, taking into account that these are the malts that give you that caramel style, that roasted coffee style, that nice, clean, crisp, sweet character. Then, of course, you're following around into wheat where it's getting nice and dry and refreshing. So that's where the base material comes from. The hops are then boiled into the actual malt extract. So the malt extract's made on a day-to-day basis. So we take the dry ingredients, mix with water at the right temperature, at the right pH, and create an extract, which is then a liquid extract, malt extract, which is purely maltose, sucrose, and glucose. And then that is brought to the boil for a sense of preservation. And then, of course, while we're boiling for that period of 75 minutes, we're also imparting the bitterness and the aroma profile of the beer. So when we get to that, we talk about citrus, mojito, lime characteristics on the nose, and then we're talking about that sort of grassy green character of bitterness on the back of the palate, or the spiciness. They come from all the different library of flavours from the hops as well. So it's a marriage between the malts and the hops based on the individual recipe.
Now you're dealing with KAISER Brothers Brewery, obviously, and they've got recipes that date back to the mid-1800s. Have you adapted them or adopted them, or what have you done?
Well, I think the ingredients have always been the same. I would like to probably say that, it's, well, first of all, it's regional. So we're supporting ingredients that come from our region. As I said, our malts come from Dunsandel, our hops come from the top of the South Island. So what we're trying to do is stay within the South Island block, But yes, the adaptation, going back to the original question, the adaptation is still the same because the ingredients have always been the same for centuries. It's just maybe technology has made it more efficient for companies to produce it and maybe quicker in a sense. But the materials as the base materials are still the same.
As a head brewer, do you experiment?
Yeah, there is room for experimentation. You know, we do come to work every day to achieve greatness. That is definitely part of, you know, what it is we do. However, you know, there are times when, particularly when we're in the marketplace now, within our, you know, supermarket sales chain, our on-premise chains, etc., and obviously looking for export in the future, that we really don't want to sort of get too variable. We'd like to think by now, after, you know, we've been trading now since June of last year, that we've got a strong formulations in place. But that's not saying there are variables, because like any business that's based on grain, hops, growing seasons, same as the wine industry, there are many variables that can come to you on a day-to-day basis. So of course, but we as take that science and adjust ourselves through that process. We're aware of those variables. They're not major variables, they're small things, and we just tweak them and make them more easier to, you know, get to the finished product.
As a top winemaker will do.
Exactly the same, no different. That's what makes a great winemaker, is he knows his growing season very well. He knows what he's got up against him, the good, the bad, and of course he will then, shall we say, then go about his art and produce wine that actually suits that season and actually reflects that season as well. And that's another thing, and particularly in the KAISER range, is, you know, we have base range of styles of beer that sort of reflect international styles, coming strong from the Germanic side, and of course we've got a little bit of English and a little bit of American, but the seasonal beers will always sort of come from the season, what we've got the feeling going on out there. As we head into autumn, and of course our winter months ahead, so now dark beer becomes, you know, a bigger player in the marketplace versus the crisp, clean, dry sort of Pilsner style of summer.
We've come a long way from beer being beer, haven't we?
We've come a long way, yeah, because beer is now artisan made, artisan produced, and it's also reflected on in the household and on the dining room, and, you know, it's shared with food, and it has all those nuances to work with food just as much as wine has. So it gives that chance, you know, to be expressed, those ingredients to be expressed, and also gives a chance for the family to share in something and sort of educate the younger generations. You know, beer is not just a product that was done way back in way back in the days of, you know,
the 1960s and 70s, and probably the 80s.
And probably the 80s. So, you know, whereas now it's more appreciated, the word is craft, artisan, and that's probably where I think where we would always like to be. As a beer industry, I think we've finally caught up with our winemaking brothers, in a sense of now we are offer styles and varietals of products that are absolutely acceptable at the dining room table.
And you're making it for both sexes?
Absolutely, that's another big part. Yes, there's always the female and the male marketplace. They're the big, I mean, take into account if we would logistically see that the majority of beers that probably purchased through a supermarket chain are ladies. They do buy on behalf of the husband, there's no two ways about it.
And themselves.
And themselves, of course. So that gives them an opportunity, and then they can express the styles of beer that they like, because they're obviously maybe a little bit more attuned to maybe some of the wine varietal flavours that might then, so they can find beers in that category as well. Whereas our husband just might want something simple, green and important.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
I've been reporting on farming matters on the radio and newspapers and on television for 40 or so years, but communication, like farming, has moved on. So we've come up with On the Land, online and through YouTube on any screen, anytime and anywhere. Just push play and see and hear what's happening today in our rural community. You'll learn and be informed about the latest and best information farming matters. On the Land, bringing farming information into the 21st century. So join us on our website ontheland.co.nz.
Not sure why your camellias aren't cooperating? Try Growsure Planting Magic, packed full of nutrients in just one handful. Be sure with Growsure from KiwiCare.
One of the major barriers for young people is feeling alone and isolated within a family or within a group. They don't think that we older people will listen, and 99 times out of 100 they probably don't. So how can we older generation help?
Well, Rob, you know yourself, you've had, issues with depression. You've been very brave in speaking out about it, and I applaud you on that. I think what I'm hearing from young people is that the older generation don't necessarily understand depression or have an inability to talk about it with their children. I've heard of some young people who have said their parents still can't get their heads around their children have been diagnosed with depression, and I think that's just the culture they were brought up in, and the fact that you kept your problems to yourself. Farming is a very isolated industry in New Zealand, and because of that it does inherently leave people to want to bring keep their problems to themselves. And so often we hear of suicides in older farmers who have never spoken out about their feelings, or nobody has ever had any inclination, let alone their partners or their families, that they're suffering. I'm hoping this new generation is going to be different, and by them opening up and being transparent, parents and the older generation can see, hey, it's okay to admit not everything's fine all the time, because nobody's ever happy all the time, are they?
There's a feeling that young people haven't experienced hardship enough to be feeling like this. That's an older person's view, Typically an older person like myself will go, you guys haven't lived yet. What do you know about pressure? What do you know about stress? Work in my life for a day. And that's, again, it's a prejudice. So because there's, and prejudice, we think fly under the radar. They're pretty obvious to the person that you're talking to. So if they feel that older people who are role models, who are peoples of authority, actually aren't approachable because they don't understand, what do? They haven't necessarily got opportunities or skills to actually reach out like you and I might have if we're lucky. We actually might be able to be self-aware enough to go, you know what, I'm not right, I maybe need to ask. A young person certainly doesn't have that ability. And if older people are sort of giving off the impression that, oh, just harden up, or you haven't lived long enough yet to really feel pressure, then there's no solution for them.
They don't quite understand, especially with these social media things. Say if it's from bullying or any other pressure, you can't escape it through social media, and parents don't quite understand it's not just going to school or work and it finishes when you walk out the door, but you're constantly in that world of feeling the pressure, feeling everything against you. And I think they need to realise that there's that change, that you're not just safe in your own home anymore, that feelings are real for young people. Like, they do feel the pressure a lot more than they did back in the day because there are so many options, and it's just taking over.
And then there's the stigma. If only we could come up with a word that didn't say committed suicide, because that reeks of it being of crime, but it's not. But the stigma is very real.
Well, we find that there's a bit of a stigma attached to it, especially in the farming community. There's a bit of a get on with it approach, or man up, or those kind of words attached with it. So becoming a facilitator of this program, one of the things I wanted to get across to people was that it's not a bad thing to be suffering from mental health, and those stigmas are pretty old school. So these days we just need to help people through it and show them support rather than attaching that stigma to it.
My own father committed suicide when I was 5 years old, and I lived in a rural community, and there was a huge stigma around it, so much so that I was kind of labelled as the child that, whose father committed suicide 15 years later. And I can say honestly to this day, that every day I think of him, and it affects the way I am and who I am today. So the after effects of suicide is just tremendous. It doesn't go away. I wonder every day what he would think of me now, and who I am and who I've become, and wonder what he would have been like, because he died younger than I am now, and that's quite an eerie thought, really.
And it's so judgmental. And that's something that, and I guess I was as judgmental as the next person until you experience it yourself. You know what, these people don't decide to do it just to annoy other people, or they're not thinking about consequences. They're not thinking what the impact is to people around them. Like this guy I was talking about, a young farmers member, had 2 preschool girls. Now he wasn't thinking, you know what, I'm going to screw their lives up potentially by doing this. So to me the commit word is a blame word, and we've got to move away from that.
It's bloody terrible, especially when I started as a young bloke, testosterone fueled. The last thing I want to do is be labelled as weak or not right in the head and all sorts, and that sort of crashes you and holds you back from talking about it. It makes it worse. You just chew in your own head and you never get away from it.
There is a huge stigma around depression, and we think we are getting on top of it, but really we're not. When you talk to the rural community, it is inherently inside that community, that stigma. I did not tell anyone I had depression until recently. About 2 years ago I started speaking out about it and saying, look, I don't care if you know if I had depression, it doesn't change me as a person. And I think people like John Kerwin have made great inroads in that area, and Doug Avery, by speaking out, but we need more people to come forward. We need more people to tell their stories, and some of our young farmer members have been so brave in telling us their stories, and it's helped. Every time someone tells a story, there's 100 people will contact us and say, look, I've had the same thing. I'm so grateful they spoke out. So be brave, share your story, because that's the only way we're going to improve this situation.